is for a lot of the investors that are in the room, on market seems to get a bad rep for a lot of ways, right? And I think we'll probably all agree that for the most part, the investor guru types that are out there, they'll tell you, stay away from the on-market properties that are out there. There's just not a lot of meat on the bone. And Bill will probably shake his head in agreement on this, but I would probably put myself in that same camp several years back as well. And quite honestly, by stumbling upon a way in which to kind of get deals on the MLS in a way that makes sense, that's really what created and convinced us kind of otherwise. And of course, I think we're all here because maybe you have an idea on what we're doing, so we can get into that a little bit later. But before I jump in and kind of pick on Clifford here, Bill, anything else that you want to color kind of the tee up of our conversation with here as we talk about MLS?
No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure we got people in here, all different walks of life, different strategies of how they're approaching their markets. So I'm super excited. There's been a few meetings prior to this. Clifford and I, just the other day, we had a nice deep dive into the dispo world, right? So we're working on doing some more specific dives, whether it's dispo, TC. I think the next thing we have queued up, if I'm not mistaken, we're gonna jump into how do you underwrite a property and what the importance is of that. So I'm really looking forward to the series of content that is coming out. I'm happy to share all my experiences today. Being the first Rappi user in the system, and happily wearing the guinea pig crown, right, of all the things that we're working on. And there's a lot of different irons in the fire. We'll do our best to stay focused on on market deals, what some of the psychology is there, sales process, and some of the values that you can maybe get from utilizing the system that maybe some of you guys haven't fully appreciated. And I'm a big fan of reframing things in life, and as soon as you can start to reframe a little bit and kind of look at things from a different perspective, all of a sudden it might give you a little bit more energy or understanding. I think a lot of leaders out there and people in general sometimes forget the significance of communicating the why, and it's just like, hey, here's this cool platform and it does this, and you kind of lack the depth behind why it was built and what the true value is behind it. So hopefully we can get into some of that today, do a little bit of war stories of why we got to where we're at. So I'm looking forward to it, and don't be ashamed with questions. I'm looking forward to getting to some of the questions. I cannot promise I will have the answers to all those questions. Quite frankly, I'm sure some of the questions that are going to be asked are some of my questions, right? So it can be some open forum. But we've certainly learned a lot in the last year of operating within Rappi, and we've made some good money too. So exciting times.
Awesome. So, and real quick for everybody else on this call, just kind of a general rundown. I saw a question in the chat. Yes, this call is being recorded. We'll distribute that to everybody that was on this call. Thing number two, here's going to be kind of the agenda for today. We're going to spend kind of the first block of time talking with Clifford. And our goal here is I want Clifford to talk, and by the way, he doesn't know any of these questions in advance, but I just want to talk very organically about kind of his experience engaging with on market as somebody that came from that other kind of mindset of, really just sticking to the off market world. So I'm going to put him in the hot seat, and he's been gracious enough with his time. Yeah. Better take some sips of water, man. You're gonna be doing a lot of talking.
Let me pour me a glass of water.
Tee it up, man. 2 chili peppers coming your way. Second half, the second portion of today's call, I'm going to talk just some high-level strategy, kind of best practices, and some things that we've quite honestly just uncovered organically over the last couple of years of soliciting deals from the MLS, and maybe some good takeaways, some strategies in the effort of like, hey, if you leave here today and you want to go do this on your own and you never want to talk to anybody from the Hey Rappi team again, that's totally cool. That's kind of the goal. We want to make sure we serve with some value here on how you can kind of go accomplish those things. The tail end of this, I've got some kind of questions from the community, if you will. These might be some more specific Hey Rappi items. So, I might do a quick demonstration on some of the components on the platform. So we'll roll through those, and then we'll have some Q&A time at the very end. So if you're kind of on this call and you're looking to maybe zone in and out on sections, now you kind of have a general cadence. So you want to respond to a couple of emails while you're in there. I'm not going to take any offense by any means. Any questions, again, drop them in the chat. And then just one last thing, if by the end of this, you're like, hey, I really want to check out more of what's going on with the Hey Rafty platform, if you're not already kind of part of our network, feel free to drop your email down below. We'll link up with you. Kind of happy to take it from there. So anyway, that's kind of the tee up. Mr. Clifford.
Yes, sir.
Closing Cowboy. So you and I bumped into each other kind of. I guess I called you at some point, right? And I know kind of the original thoughts from the back of your head were like, yeah, okay, I'll give this a try. There can't be a lot of value for on market world. What was kind of like your preconceived notion of like what the MLS is as it relates to finding a good investment property? Like what was your understanding?
My initial understanding is specifically with the MLS was honestly for me was to just stay away from it, right? Like I never bothered with it for, I would say the first 4 or 5 years, actually 5 years now, because this is my 6th year. So the first 5 years of me doing real estate investing was always direct to seller. That's the way that my coaches taught me. That's the way that I always taught my members, like direct to seller. That was kind of like the main thing to focus on and just kind of stay away from the MLS. And every blue moon, I would come across a deal that was just happened to be on the MLS. It wasn't anything specifically that I targeted. And so it was one of those things where like, it was just new, unfamiliar territory, so to speak, that I was kind of walking into.
So you stayed away from it. Like, why'd you, and maybe not intentionally, but why did you try to stay away from it? Obviously, you said the only thing you really knew was direct to seller, but was there a caveat in the back of your head of like what's happening in the MLS land?
No, I just did what my coaches told me to do. There was no crazy thinking behind it, crazy logic. You know, I think that many of us, when we get coaching or mentoring or, you know, we're trying to elevate ourselves, typically we try to follow that coach's advice. And I think that was the same thing with me. Like I just simply modeled what my coaches were doing, and the MLS just wasn't a part of their strategy. So it was one of those things where I didn't sit back and question. I said, you know what, let me do their model because their model's working for them. And it did. I mean, it worked for them.
Why does it work in your mind? Well, actually, let's not go there yet. So we kicked the thing off. You did have some good kind of traction day one. What was some things around the starting or some of those initial conversations that surprised you? Maybe some challenges that you weren't anticipating.
I think the challenges that I wasn't, well, I wouldn't say I wasn't anticipating them. It was just, I know the conversations were going to be a lot different, talking to agents versus talking to sellers. And even my approach is night and day difference, because I like to believe that I'm an extremely empathetic, maybe understanding person, you know, especially when I'm talking to sellers directly. So there's a lot of care and empathy and just rapport building going on that I'm having direct to seller that I'm not having with agents. So now it's kind of fun because I just get to be blunt and direct and to the point. Like there's no there's no fluff, there's no sugarcoating it. It's like, nope, this is our offer. Here it is. Let us know if it works. If not, all right, thank you.
Yeah, right. You can move on. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You know, Bill, my partner, he very elegantly stated, he's like, what's kind of interesting is that you don't have to basically handle the first half of the sales process, right? Whereas you go direct to a seller, you are starting with kind of the softer components of the sales process, the motivation, you know, what's this person's distress, like the why, right? Like getting back to that question of like the why does this person want to even have a conversation with me?
Yeah.
And you have to, you know, in being a good empathetic salesperson, like you have to dig down through the layers of that to make sure that you're making a good connection. You're going to be able to solve the problem, blah, blah, blah. But to your point, you just get right to the meat and potatoes of the deal making or the negotiation process. And it pretty much is predicated right on price, right? You almost go there first and then you work your way back from the price. Just pretty unique in a lot of ways. How do you think that's like, do you think that was an easier thing for you to accomplish now because you're able to have maybe a higher frequency of conversations and just get it more to the nitty gritty?
I think it is definitely easier to have these conversations, especially for like newer investors coming in, because honestly, you know, I truly believe that there's a secret sauce that none of the gurus talk about, and that's communication. Right? Communication is so much a part of what we do as real estate investors, right? To where you really have to develop your communication skills with when you're talking to sellers, versus it's a little bit different with agents. So even if you suck as a communicator, you can still have deals come in. You can still make offers to where they just make sense. I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but am I making sense there, y'all?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, one of the kind of the interesting things, and this is just my opinion here. Bill, feel free to disagree with me. Hopefully you'll disagree with me. But you know, an agent, they're like a professional, right? Like, so you're not actually, so when like you're going direct to the seller world, like you're not dealing with another professional. You are dealing with like another, you know, a layman, a human, whatever you want to, you know, call that person, right? Whereas like the professional, to your point, like they can kind of brunt the burden of that communication, right? And making sure they understand it. Now, where that gets challenging is not all agents are created equal. And I think probably everybody that's engaged them would acknowledge that, right? And we see this in our own world, right? Like you're going to engage with the agents who get it. Like, okay, this is the 15th time that you've reached out to me. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm going to give you a respectful call and tell you also why this doesn't work. But, you know, hey, we could still do business down the road. And then there's some agents who just don't.
Yeah.
You know, but again, you know, back to the same thing. It's like, what's kind of cool about this is you can very quickly figure out who the good communicators are and maybe even rely on them a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my experience with this is, you know, similar, Clifford, right? We've had conversations on this. And I've had conversations with, I believe, some of the people, you know, in the room here about how the psychology changes. And I feel like I know this happened for me in the beginning of it, and I quickly, you know, went back to the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid, of overthinking, you know, what was going on and trying to go to these like shadow games of what's going on. Are you a scam? Why are you sending me these offers? And per usual, just like I learned, you know, a couple of years into my wholesaling career, it's just transparency and truth is always so much better and cleaner as far as getting to your conversions and just letting these people know, hey, this is what I'm doing. You don't need to dance around it, right? I'm sending these offers out. You know, so sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Maybe it doesn't work for this property. Perhaps they have pocket listings, but the whole point is you want them to be aware of your brand and what your intentions are with every conversation that you're having. Because the more genuine you can come off, you know, the more you can maybe convert some of those people who are a little bit sour up front about, you know, why the hell did you send me this offer? I'm only 30 days on the market. You know, where do you get off sending me a 30% discounted offer? It's like, to some respect, you know, you build a script around don't hate the player, right? Hate the game. And then, listen, I'm going to be a player in this game and I'm going to be a player in this area. And I'm looking to do honest, respectful business. So, you know, I can add you to, you know, my blacklist, right? Of I don't need to send these, and I can respect that. That's fine. But, you know, we're doing some good things over here at XYZ company. You know, this can be a two-way street too, right? I like to make sure we understand what the two-way value street is. Like I mentioned before in the intro on this phone call, I want to make sure everyone understands all of the values of what happened when, you know, you're essentially machine gunning out offers, right? We need to start reframing, are these offers or are these pieces of marketing material, or are these simply just pieces of, branding material. Well, it's all those things, right?
All those things.
So depending on who you're interacting with, you can kind of like change up your script. Having a bunch of mercenaries that you've built relationships with in the form of local agents in areas you care about, that's a really good thing, right? You spend that couple extra minutes with them, even if it's not going to work on that deal, whether it's you or someone on your team. Perhaps you were given the gift of someone like Clifford, right? Who clearly, has some empath abilities about him. People like to be on the phone with people like that. And that immediately, kind of takes them off their aggressive edge and is like, okay, I'm talking to a human. This guy's not trying to, scam my grandma. He's here to do real business. And that doesn't convert everyone, right? You still might get the middle finger from some people. But
I still get it.
yeah, right. You can be as nice as you want. No one wants to see a $200K reduction on their asking price. That's really attacking their inner citadel sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of values when you're reaching out. And very quickly, and I'll give the mic back to you guys. I think, Jared, you asked that question to Clifford about like digging into what that stigma is. And Clifford was like, hey, my coaches told me to do this, so do this. Similar bucket for me, for sure. All my mentors, and when you kind of think about water and the path of least resistance, this is the way we think about sales, right? And conversions. You're always thinking about like, what is the least resistance to get to conversions? And part of that is cutting out a bunch of competition, right? So that's a core reason why a lot of us go to the off market. We know that person doesn't have a red dot up on Zillow waving around a giant flag saying, please come compete with my offer. So as soon as you change the understanding of, if I can build a process around competing with all these red dots, right? I don't have to manually put that effort in for each one that I'm interested in. I can kind of just let, the offer send out, do the work of the initial filtering. Well, now you're back in the game, right? So most of us don't do that because it's too much effort is the point I'm making. But if we can get back to a systemized approach, now all of a sudden, like, okay, I can play here. And maybe it's not, 100% of my lead flow. Maybe it is, right? It's fine either way. Depending on where you're at in your own evolution as a, person in this business, but it's just, when you have good systems, right. And you got good people working those systems, a lot of things are possible. And I think that's, partly what Rafi has enabled my team to do.
Yeah.
So Clifford, what's working for you right now? You got, and I know we've had some sidebar conversation, right? We've had a little bit of a roller coaster, ups and downs. Right now you're sending a pretty hefty amount of offers each day. And I know you and I have been tickling around some other new fun ideas, but what do you think's working? What's not working?
I'm ready to crank it up.
Let's go.
Even more.
Yeah.
It's actually so funny too. And this will kind of put things in perspective, y'all, on not just the platform. So when we first launched this, I committed and I told Jerry, I said, I have about 2 hours a day that I want to personally work on this myself, that my schedule will allow. And we were just kind of tailoring the offers going out to fit my schedule. And so now we're at that point where we're hiring somebody now to come in and take me off the platform. But I'm still around that 2 hours, 3 hours of actively working in the platform a day. And I feel like we're upwards of 200 offers going out every single day. So just FYI. That kind of threw me off. What was the question again?
What's working? What's not working?
Oh, what's working? I mean, the platform's working. I think with anything, it's volume, consistency, and follow-up, right? You showed me a really neat trick to go in there and how to start following up with those agents that haven't sold the properties that maybe we touched bases with them, a month ago, 2 months ago. But yeah, it's working. I am starting to learn the different markets, and like just the offers aren't good enough. It's not going to be the same in every market. Say, for example, like the deals that we were getting at 70% in Atlanta, they just weren't cutting it. Like we actually needed to lower that just because of the market there, right? And we had to keep going back to do renegotiating the deal, which is okay. But now I just learned that over time. And I'm actually learning that right now with El Paso. Like it seems like we need to lower that with El Paso as well, because it's kind of fallen into that same bucket. So the platform itself, and even this lead magnet, this strategy works in general, but it's like with anything again, I harp and preach to my community, volume, consistency, and follow up. Like they're probably sick of hearing it, but that's it.
Talk to me a little bit more about the one market you said, you know, maybe you've got to drop things down a little bit. Like what's some of the red flags that you're getting where you're like, oh, that's a problem? Has it just been during the underwriting process? Is it around the way the responses are coming in? Like what's giving you that indication?
It was the buyer's feedback. It wasn't so much so the underwriting process. Like the deals looked solid, like they looked good in my opinion, but when you go and send them out, at the end of the day, things only worth what people are willing to pay for it, right? And so we just have to go based on what the feedback is from the buyers. Yeah. And with me being here in Texas, of course, they're in Atlanta, they might see or know things that I just don't know yet about the market, you know. Mm-hmm. You know, Florida pops up in my mind, like they have huge termite issues a lot, you know, so there might just be certain little things like that that Atlanta market has to deal with that I'm just not aware of, that they keep coming back and lowering the price.
Yeah, lead paint, some of those asbestos prone homes, things of that nature. You know, Jersey's kind of interesting because there's all the oil tanks, you know, that creates a huge red flag when you're going to buy one. Mm-hmm. Hey, real quick, this popped into my head. For anybody that's on this call who maybe doesn't have a clue who we are or like what we're doing, we are quite simply talking about a process of sending out offers for MLS properties at a significant discount and using that to generate conversations. So just kind of give you guys a very high level scope on what's happening here.
And may I add to that before we go on? Yeah. Especially for somebody that's new, and why I am so amped about this, because one of my missions is truly to get as many people started in real estate investing as possible, right? Getting deals this way, reaching out to sellers off of the MLS, I truly believe is probably one of the easiest and simplest ways to get started in this industry, right? Like, I truly am a firm believer in that now. I think back when I first started, I would literally be driving my truck down the road, cold calling for hours and hours and hours at a time. And I'm talking about 8, 9, 10, 11 hours at a time. Who in here wants to sit on a phone call for 8 to 10 hours a day, like hammering calls? I did that every single day, literally every day, for like the first 3 months until I, quit my job. But nobody wants to do that anymore, right? Bill said something to me the other day that will stick with me for the rest of my life. He said, do more and think less. Do more and think less. Y'all, this gives me the ability to do more and think less, right? Because also, think about how many steps it's eliminating. When I was doing that cold calling, first I was just using my phone. So I would go to PropStream, I would pull the list, I would skip trace the list, I would filter that list, and then I would start doing my calls, right? Manually. Once I actually got deals closed and started getting a dollar system, well, now I had to figure out how to upload that list into the dollar system and, use whatever templates they wanted me to use on which platform I was using at the time, right? So it's cutting out all of those little unnecessary steps that people honestly don't have to take. And it's information right here in front of us.
Well said.
Yeah, I think we can get into a whole Alice in Wonderland hole on inbound leads versus outbound.
Mhm.
That's its own conversation. I think I saw a question pop up of what do you think about cold calling? I don't think we're necessarily saying like, hey, to hell with cold calling, right? Like,
No, we still do it. We still
Right.
cold call.
right.
Yeah.
And I actually just got done. It's been I'm a couple years removed from having a cold caller on my in-house team. I've been working with different vendors that are out there, different cold calling shops, and I've had my ups and downs with those shops. But I recently came to this conclusion of what, since 2 years ago, our training process and onboarding process is so much stronger than what it was. And being able to control the development of your own people, there's a certain value to that. The argument to that is there's a lot of value to outsourcing as well and finding the right vendor. I get it. But my pendulum is always swinging back and forth with things and kind of exploring the boundaries of what makes the most sense for the business. I most recently hired a cold caller, and I have just to give people a little context, I have a 15-person team. And we have all sorts of different inbound services, pay-per-lead services, Google, Facebook, in addition to what we do with Rafi. So there's no harm in hiring an in-house cold caller, potentially even having them help you with some of the initial screening that happens within Rafi, right? I don't like to chop up people's day too much with different tasks, right? You want them to be really good in a specific lane, but doing a little bit of qualifying, the way that they do cold calling and helping you qualify some of the initial feedback. I know my team has a problem with, especially when we say, hey, you know what? Let's turn on 5 more campaigns and let's not even have a timeline filter. Let's just send offers out day one on the market. It's like, what are you, crazy? And yeah, we did that. And I just felt, I knew what was going to happen when we played with those volume nozzles. And I was kind of waiting to see how long it would take for my team to come back and squeal a little bit. Like, hey, Bill, thanks, but no thanks. That wasn't so much fun. But I am a big believer in creating chaos and then controlling chaos, right? So I don't, I like to try to avoid the whole analysis paralysis thing when I'm making some decisions with the team. And I also feel very confident in my team, their systems mindset and all that good stuff that I preach here over at Rise. But create chaos, control chaos, right? It's another thing that I say a lot. Don't forget the part where you control it, though. To Clifford's point, he says create volume and be consistent with that volume. We're kind of, speaking the same language on that front. But they're very, very important. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, don't be afraid to bring on a cold caller, and maybe utilize them within your hierarchy of how you're interacting with Rafi or even other lead sources.
Yeah, I think it's important to know too, I still do those other marketing strategies. I was just kind of speaking from the sense of somebody that's brand new, wanting to get started and wants to have the path of least resistance, maybe, if that's the right word or the right way to phrase it. I think this would be it. Because the goal, especially with the new investors, with anybody, we got to get the first win as fast as possible. Because once you get that first deal as fast as possible, you have proof of concept. And then the confidence gauge just kind of starts to go up and go up. You just get a whole nother level of confidence once we get you that first win as fast as we can.
Clifford, let me pause you real quick. We got a couple. We have at least a question from the folks on this call, and I think you kind of answered this, but I'll ask it to you anyway. What do you think of VAs cold calling?
They're great. I think, kind of to Bill's point, every kind of you have to work with them, right? If you go to one of those companies that outsource the VAs, they're going to promise you the world. They're going to promise you that they have the absolute best cold callers on the planet. They don't. Okay. They don't. You have to just spend time working with them, training them, giving them your expectation, your playbook, and your guidelines. And remember, I think that so many people, kind of get a VA and then just leave them and say, okay, here, this is what I need. Go get it done. At least that's the mistake that I made a few times. And I learned that, they are a part of your team and you need to nurture them and work with them and build them up. But they're amazing.
That is a mistake that even Fortune 500 companies make. Anyone can go Google this right now, but you can go see how much money is spent on hiring versus how much money is spent on onboarding. It is insane what goes on. We're also focused on get talent in the door. And then I could argue it's more important. Great, you got the talent in the door. Like, let's cultivate the talent, right?
Yeah.
I fell victim to that in my, early years of this game, not understanding like what does it really mean when you're getting 1% better and paying attention as a sales manager. And I went through all those growth steps from, maybe one meeting a week to a couple, maybe a phone call a week of a check-in to, fast forward 10 years later, we do an hour huddle up every day. I do call reviews multiple times a week, right? Another expression I say very frequently, the deep end gets deeper, right? You feel like you've explored the deep end. You're like, wait a second. There's a deeper way to do this. That's, more mature as far as, being a leader at whatever organization you guys are all at. So, the one more mentality, whatever expression you want to use, like there's always so much more, right? So that's what I have learned. And I feel like you can't pour in enough to, your people, right? The best leaders are influential and, they're creating other leaders, but you can't be a leader that's so focused on like yourself, just looking at the bottom line. I've had to find myself like pulling back from, I'm good at being on the phone and negotiating, but I'm better suited at helping my other people become better negotiators because that's a more scalable thing, right? Of course, obvious, but obvious in hindsight, right? Obvious after you go through I hired a few people. Like, why aren't they performing? Like, I'm still making my phone calls or whatever you might be doing. It's like, well, maybe you should, rethink your equation, take that time that you're spending and pour it into them and then see what you get out of that.
Yeah.
Well said. All right. I want to shift gears just slightly. I want to get maybe a little bit more detailed and definitive. And there's somebody else that had a kind of a question around this. So hopefully this kind of gets to it. So one of the unique things about, sending offers on the MLS is the contract, right? Because you're not working through the T's and C's of the deal before they get the piece of paper. They're getting the piece of paper, and then you're working the T's and C's of the deals, right? So we get we have a lot of conversations, I think, on my end around, hey, how are you shaping the contract? What are you putting for things like your deposit, your option period, due diligence, right? And every state's a little different, so it's a little confusing there as well. For the folks on this call who don't kind of know this, here's a quick best practice for you. If you're going to go do this on your own, go get the state-specific contract. It will get you the best result. We've played around with LOIs. We've played around with the off-market contract. We've played around with a whole bunch of other stuff. And I will tell you that you are going to get a freakishly better result if you can find that state-specific contract and send them out. And the reason being is because that is the piece of paper that an agent is most used to seeing. Your job when using this as a marketing material or as a lead source is to get that person as comfortable as possible to get you on the phone and see if there's something there. Yeah. So with that said, Clifford, how do you think about your contract that goes out the door? There's some questions around what are you putting for your earnest money? What are you doing with the option period? And again, if we go back to off market world, hey, I want to give you $50. Let me go get this deal for $50. Come on, I got this. It's a little different, right, in this space. So kind of just talk to us through your philosophy there.
I do want to piggyback and harp on getting your state-specific contract is massive. I was actually even saying that prior to doing the MLS deals because you get such a better result in feedback even when you're working with property owners because they're just used to that contract. They've seen it before, right? But my kind of theory is less is more in a sense on the contract. So I don't go through it with a fine-tooth comb, right? My goal is to get the offer out there and start the conversation with the agent. So in regards to earnest money and option money, I am trying to keep that as minimal as possible. Option money, $50. Earnest money, I'll do the 1% I'll put on the contract. And then option period or, termination period, due diligence period, whatever state you're in, is typically about 5 to 7 days is what I put on there starting out. I actually think we have it at 7 days because I know that every single thing is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. Everything, y'all. Everything. Did I say
all right?
Everything?
You did say everything.
Yeah.
So in that same thought, so how do you deal with then the agent that calls you up and says, "Hey man, your contract's incomplete. Like I can't. Like what do you want me to do with this garbage?"
I'll say, well, hey, Jared, I'm actually the buyer. I'm not a licensed agent. That's my offer. If you want to represent both sides, if you can represent both sides, you're more than welcome to fill that out and then submit it over to the seller. I now put that baton on them like, hey, I'm just the buyer here. I'm not an agent. You're the agent expert, right? You know how to fill out that application a lot better than I do, or that contract, right? You go ahead and handle that. So I kind of hype them up in a sense and let them know, hey, you're the expert there. Go ahead and take care of that.
I love that. Susan, looks like you raised your hand. Hi, how are you?
Hey, thanks. I have a follow-up on that. And I'm coming from the off-market side. So let's say you're, and I'm actually working with Rocky right now. So if we're putting down 1% earnest money, so let's, that could be what, $4,000 or whatever it is. And that means I have to turn around and get a buyer. If I have a 7-day option period, I have to turn around and get a buyer in 7 days, or I'm losing that $4,000. Is that realistically what you're doing? Because ideally, I would like to have a much longer option period, but I think the realtors are going to really push back on that. I'm just having a hard time strategizing that.
I can throw my 2 cents in, or
yeah. For you.
So of course we would love to have a longer option period every time we could. In that case, with the agents, they're probably not going to hear it, right? Because when I'm direct with the seller, I do a 30-day option period. Yeah, an agent ain't going for that. So yes, I do have to find that end buyer very, very quickly. So as soon as we get that signed contract, we put the pedal to the metal, as the metaphor says, right? Because on day 6, if I haven't found a buyer, I'm going to terminate that contract.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, I know we're doing a bunch of creative stuff too. You want to chime in? Might be some good color there.
I can jump in on that a little bit. One, going back to populating the contract, when we do get feedback, especially when we go into a new area, we pay attention to that, just like we pay attention to all data and all business intelligence. Definitely do what Clifford said and dangle the carrot, as I like to say, right? Because unfortunately, middlemen don't have a great history over the course of time of being always completely aligned with their sellers, right? Everyone's normally out for numero uno. And that means incentivizing them to want to do business with you. So as soon as you tell them like, hey, you can represent me, you probably just leapfrogged, 80% of the people that they're speaking to, whether, you should or shouldn't based off of your offer. We can get into the moral code of that later, but the point is like you're giving them a real offering, right? It's not a fake thing. So definitely do that. But if you're hearing the same thing over and over again, and I feel like Jared, we've probably heard things, maybe when we did like our first land campaign in Florida, there were some updates that we had to do that were a little bit different than, approaching existing structures. Update it, right? Because ultimately what you're trying to do if you're really planting your flag in an area, you're trying to cut through like all the fluff. And I always tell my sales guys, what's the best way to get ahead of or what's the best way to handle an objection is to not let the objection happen in the first place, right? So if you can do that in your contract and write some things in your contract so you don't have to hear, agent XYZ chirp at you about like, hey, dummy, you didn't fill out this spot. It's like, all right, let's get through that part, right? Since you're sending out tens and tens of offers and just fill it out. So definitely do that. And then I would say, every state contract typically has a miscellaneous section. Make the miscellaneous section your friend, right? If you want to write some things in there that help sort of transition what your off-market contract is and blend it together a little bit. I always want to be very careful where we don't feel like we're being super bait and switchy, right? You're towing this line of, I want to use this as a marketing source, and I'm trying to optimize for people reaching back out to me and having good conversations. But at the same time, you're trying to avoid as best as you can, every time being like, you know what, my price needs to go down another 10% and my due diligence period needs to be twice as long. right? So you got to know the area you're playing in. For me, I think similar to you guys in the off market, you can get 14 to 30 days pretty easily as far as option and DD periods go. But in Jersey with agents, which is one of my main stomping grounds, it's pretty typical 10, 14 days that you can make that happen. And of course, it depends on what your exit strategies are. At Rise, we're willing to close on these things directly if the numbers are good enough. But I can feel the anxiety that's in the air, just like everyone else, when you're like, shit, I have a 10-day due diligence period, and these numbers are sort of tight, and hopefully I get buyer feedback quick so I know which way this is going. But you just got to do the best you can with the data that's available in the market that you're playing in, whatever those norms are. Again, you really want to avoid feeling like you're the bait and switch guy, because these people are going to see you again, more than likely, right? So this is like a compound interest type of thing of this offer's coming and it's going to come again unless you get put on the blacklist. So you don't want to get associated as the scammy type of person where they're, regardless of you having a state contract or an off-market contract and your attachment, they've already associated with, I'm not opening this because, they're just phony baloney. So I know that was a little loaded in my response, but it is very like case by case and how you handle it. But as transparent as you can be with still optimizing for people reaching back out to you and you not looking like a complete fool. So you have to be like close, right? That's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Levi, what's up, brother? You got a question?
Yeah. So this is kind of to everybody, or the way we've been doing it now was kind of me being the realtor representing a buyer. But I kind of, it opened my mind of, the idea of just saying you're not represented. I am the buyer. Just wondering what people are doing and the feedback or the kind of, sounds like Clifford was, saying I'm the buyer, feel free to represent me, which, I'm starting to think that might be a really cool or easier way to kind of go about it versus you being the realtor, and kind of, it helps on the front end saying you're the realtor. So you kind of don't have to start with, whatever, but it's just trying to get feedback or opinions here.
Now, for me specifically, I've always done it as I'm the buyer because I'm actually not a licensed agent. So that's always the way that we're positioned in our offers. And it's been working very well for us that way.
I think this is a good split test, and I'm actively in the middle of this split test, Levi. We just recently started doing the, no agent in between. I used to have one of my closers be the agent. She's a licensed agent for at least Jersey. But it goes both ways. And the reason you do the split test is when you get into the negotiation, if you do the version where you have an agent in between, whether it's one of your colleagues or whatever, once you're engaged in one of those conversations, it's a nice option to be able to say, you know what, I don't need my commission, right? And it like gives you a negotiation chip in the middle of your negotiation to like wipe that away if you need to, versus just coming right out the gate with, hey, why don't you represent me? There's pros to both of those approaches. And I think, Levi, you were about to say, which I agree with, there's some level of agents that are out there. Yeah, they're always interested in the direct buyer, but there's also agents out there that rather deal with a professional agent. And they're just like, like people who are unrepresented, like it's going to be a sloppy offer, or, they might not be validated because they're not working with an agent. So I think it goes both ways. And I think this really speaks to what I believe everyone should be doing, because it's really easy to set up, is just split testing everything, right? As far as agent in between, you being direct as a buyer, or even split testing some of your, the language that you might be using. Very recently, we also, I think you guys heard me say before, we're not just doing, 60, 90 days plus on the market, fatigue properties. We more recently started to split test what happens if I just, shoot an offer out on day one. Why not, right? This whole system was built on the back of, let's go hit some fatigue properties, but why not get in front of people? That's the advantage that we have as virtual investors that are a little bit more agile than, husband and wife combo that need to do this whole like staggered visit thing, right? Like wife goes on Thursday, husband has to come back on Sunday. There's a lot of time that elapses for retail buyers. Us as investors, we can just like, you know, throw out these offers very quickly and kind of put the anxiety on the seller side, right? Like how long is this cash offer going to be sitting here for, type of mindset. So I'm still in the early going of what that data looks like as far as the day one offers, as well as us being the direct buyer as opposed to having an agent in between. But it's sort of like my
'cause
whiteboard on what the pros and cons are.
Yeah, my kind of struggle or pain point was when the offer comes in that is too high, kind of like Clifford, but like I'm underwriting it and realizing like this isn't going to work. Now to come back to them and tell them, well, actually my offer is lower as an agent is a lot harder than as a buyer, right? So it's like as a buyer, it'd be a lot easier conversation to have, where it's like, I'm sending these out. That's, a lot of it is automated. I got to underwrite it and I got to come back and tell you what I'm really at, where I'm really at versus as an agent, they kind of expect you to,
Mhm.
be ready to present when you actually are ready to present and not just mess around with them. So anyways, I'm really excited to try to test or figure out how to, leverage my team because most of them are not licensed. So I was kind of having to do most of it on my own. So it would be cool to kind of let them do a lot of the work and just come in unrepresented. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think Levi, you'll be excited. We're working on a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, but some of the business intelligence stuff that we're working on that we're baking into the Rafi is going to be exciting on that front for us data nerds in the room, right? That's going to be, in-house being able to track some of these things of how like the A/B split test is going. And of course we have some analytics we're tracking. But we're gonna, we're in the process of taking that, to the next level. So exciting
Yeah.
things to
And
come on that front.
just to finish off, a shout out. We just closed our first Rafi wholesale yesterday. So that was
Let's
exciting.
go. Congratulations.
It's good
Yeah.
stuff.
We should just end it there. Hey man, it's good seeing you guys. Take care.
I love it.
That's great, man. Awesome. Thanks, Levi. Appreciate you, brother. All right, Clifford. I think you only got one question left for the hot seat, bro. And thanks for hanging in there. I haven't seen you drink that much water though. I'm a little surprised. I thought this was going to be a little more intense, but I guess I've been lobbing you softballs the whole time. So
Yes,
it's
sir.
okay. I understand. I'm coachable too. I'll take the feedback. Be better at interviewer. Got it. Understood.
No, it's great. It's great.
So here we go. Anything on, and this is Rafi specific. So anything on the platform that either you don't love or that you wish you had?
Actually, yes, I do. You better get some notes.
All
You better
right.
get a pen and paper.
I got it. Ready.
No, you know what? And this is just me personal preference, especially after spending some time with Bill. One thing too that I'm learning is that numbers really drive a business. KPIs and knowing your numbers is probably one of the most crucial, important things that people can have, not just as a real estate investor, but as somebody that wants to turn this into a business, right? And so I would love to see the first thing that I will log into this platform is my KPIs right there in my face. Like how many offers went out, how many of those responded, how many of those I've got under contract. Because when we see it and it's right in front of our face, we can't help but to acknowledge it and spend time with it. And it also gives us the ability to fine tune and now start A/B testing things like Bill was mentioning. I think for me specifically, because I am not that numbers guy, this is probably one of the biggest struggles that me personally, I'm getting personal now, that I've had as a business owner over the last 5 years. Like to where now we just had to hire somebody that's responsible for doing it, because if it's left up to me, it will not get done. I don't know what it is about me and spreadsheets. I don't like them, y'all. I'd rather sit on the phone and cold call before I have to pull up a spreadsheet and start going through some data. And so I think that if we could make it so in your face, even for the other people, kind of like myself, because surely I'm not the only one that doesn't get along with Excel, right? But if we made it that simple for people, I think that it's gonna start changing the switch or the mindset that, okay, these numbers are probably very important for me to know, because they are. That's what drives a business, like, period.
Data don't lie, as they say.
Exactly.
That's good feedback. That's really good feedback. Thank you so much. You will be delighted, hopefully, in the next 30 days then.
I am
forward to it.
jazzed up in that particular room, as Jared knows. Jared's probably like, Bill, do not go off on a tangent right now.
Yeah.
And I will not go off on a tangent right now. But what I will say is, I know people fall into one of a few buckets with this. It's either like they don't know that they should be tracking numbers. They know they should be tracking numbers, but it's just like, you know, as you guys have heard me say, it's you're standing at the bottom of the mountain and you're like, man, it's a long way to get up there. Or you've actually started to track your numbers and then you kind of forget that you're tracking it and you're like, what do I do with these numbers? Like, great, I'm tracking them, but what happens next? So, you know, to your point, if you had them in your face, or if they were automated and perhaps there was an omnipresent AI that was helping you maybe even gamify, you know, the whole thing, as they say in the tech world, and make it a little bit more fun instead of, okay, this ratio says this, so I should do this. It's like, yes, that, you know, you do need to do that. And I think, as a lot of us have learned, doing the boring stuff is actually what helps you build a successful, repeatable business. And knowing the numbers is certainly one of those things. But if you could have someone in the background that was like launching off some fireworks for you, right? And like, hey, do this, right? Like in bright letters, or hey, don't do this. Equally as important. Stop spending $1,000 here. This is clearly just a dead end, and I don't know why you keep doing it. Look at the numbers. So there's so much stuff there. That's a whole section in its own right.
Yeah.
But that would be massive, at least for somebody such as myself who's trying to dig deeper. Like, me and Bill's had conversations, you know, not being recorded, about KPIs and stuff like that. And I've vented and I've shared my expressions with my struggles with those. But it's gotten to the point too, even with me personally, like, I've had to save like my spreadsheets as a screensaver and make it a point and say, not as a screensaver, but like as a quick link on my desktop to say, Clifford, open this every day. And I just want to share that little tad bit for everybody, because Bill's been doing this for 10 years or so. I've been in it 6 years now. Like, just like he mentioned earlier, there's going to be a massive learning curve, like, for everybody. And you're going to learn different things at different seasons throughout your real estate investing journey. Y'all just enjoy this journey, like, enjoy it. Period, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, right? When things go south, just really sit back and say, okay, well, what could we have learned from this? You know, when things are going good, why did they go so good? How can we duplicate this? And how can I improve? And right now, I'm just in a season of improving myself as a leader and as a business owner by knowing my numbers a lot better. So I don't know. That's my little rant. I don't know.
I think, just to cap this off, and you know, we can move on here, but I think this is one of the, you know, golden nuggets outside of Rafi experience, but just even down to personal life, not just business life, but creating good habits, right? So even if you don't have a lot of numbers to track right now, get into the habit of tracking your numbers, right? I have a mentor that tells me, like, let the data talk to you, right? So set up time on your calendar, make sure you've tracked numbers so you then can just go stare at the data. It's okay if the first time you stare at the data, you're just like, yep, looks like numbers. But the more you sit with it, and perhaps, you know, you have your chat GPT opened up on the side and you learn, right? Or you're part of Clifford program, or you got some mentors, whatever it is. I told my wife I was going to be home at 6 o'clock last night, found myself in a chat GPT hole for an hour, didn't get home till 7 because I was trying to build out a table on cash conversion cycles. We proceed to go on a dog walk, and I'm like, hey, babe, guess what I was building? And she was like, shut your mouth.
Yeah.
But point is, if you can get into a good habit of, you know, just at least tracking your numbers, and then as you have more numbers to look at, you'll be happy with your previous self of, I'm happy I'm in this habit and I'm doing this because now like I'm at least in this routine, and that's honestly it's almost more than half the battle, just getting into the routine.
Yeah. Good. Nice plug there, Clifford. You always seem to come in with those one-liners that are like, they resonate really well. Just enjoy the ride. So quick personal story. I read Clifford's book a couple of weeks back, and it was like, I was going through like, I just had a kid, and it was probably like one of those nights where I was on like the third time being up, before 3 a.m. And I'm just like, but he was like, take risks, do great things, something along those lines. And it just like, it was like one of those things where you hear it at the right time and like when you just need it the most. So kudos to you, bro. That was the second time you've done that. Huh? Thanks, bro.
Thank you, bro.
All right. So quick transition of things. So thanks, Clifford. Appreciate you, brother. That was perfect. And you also gave us some good feedback as well. I appreciate that. So before I kind of like let Clifford off the hook here, any questions for Clifford, maybe directly from anybody else that's on the call? Something we didn't answer that we should? All right, cool. So part 2 of this is I'm going to spend a couple minutes just talking about strategy. So let's say you're already, using our platform, or let's say you have no interest in ever using our platform, but you're very interested in grabbing deals on the MLS. Well, what I'd like to share with you is some best practices, how we go about thinking about strategy when we go out and target a particular area. If you're part of kind of like our community, these are some of the best practices that I will also share there as well. I hope to go maybe one level deeper on this. So we're probably going to spend about the next 20 minutes. So hopefully I'm going to make this pretty conversational too. So if you have any questions or I'm going too fast or whatever, please stop me, punch something in the chat, and I will pause. So Eli, you were the gentleman who said hello, and you also introduced where you're from. So I'm going to pick Dallas as kind of like our case study here. So okay, here's the tee up for this. I'm an investor. Maybe I'm in the game already. I'm looking to have another lead channel, or hey, I'm looking just to get into this. And I know MLS for whatever reason. Maybe it's something I want to dip my toe into the water. So like, how should you get started? Like, where do you start? What do you like? Am I just going to go send out an offer on everything that's out there? Should I focus on the foreclosures? Should I focus on auction properties? Like, what makes sense? Like, what's the best stuff to target? And the best place that you can start, no matter where you are going to start this journey, is with a little data. So, and I'm picking Eli. I'm going to pick on you, bro. Sorry, man. Where in Dallas you live? Give me a town.
I live in the Waxahachie area.
Gotcha. Yeah, spell that for me. I want to find it on here.
Waxahie. Let me see. CHIE. It's kind of hard.
We picked a really good one to start with. This is good. This will test all of our spelling skills here real quick. Okay. So Waxahachie.
There you go.
All right, cool.
There you go.
So let's say, hey, I'm in Waxahachie. I want to see, how does this market look for real estate investing on the MLS? Well, what's beautiful is I can use a lot of tools that are out there and they're for free to really get a very visible insight into this particular market. So I'm literally going to come in here to Google, and I'm going to type in market insights. Whoop. Waxahachie, Texas, and then I'm going to just put Zillow in there so it knows what I'm referring to. I want to find this page right here. Let's click on that, and your page should look something like this. Now, if you scroll down, you're going to come to this screen right here. And for those of you who know me, you maybe have already seen this. So let's talk through this. There's a couple of really interesting things to think about if you want to go target properties on the MLS. The first one is something that's kind of come up a couple times in this conversation, and that is volume. So right now in Waxahachie, there are 341 properties for sale, and that was as of March 31st. And on average, there's 89 properties that are coming on kind of each month. Now, of course, all of these numbers will rise and fall depending on where we're at in the season. So the first thing I want to look for is like a healthy amount of inventory, because you got to remember, I'm not going to go get 341 deals under contract tomorrow. This would probably only qualify for a very, very, very small percentage. So if you want to know about kind of what we think about as it relates to some volume, is we like to pick towns or cities that have at least 1,000 properties for inventory here. That is not to say that you can't go out and get a fabulous deal in this part of Texas, it is just to say that if you are truly going to live by kind of the numbers mentality and want to have volume behind it, you want to start in an area that has a lot of inventory. The second thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at new listings. So right now, this is 89 new listings. And if we just do some simple math and, I take that 89 and I divide it by the 341, that's going to give me a ratio, and that's called your refresh rate. So right now there's a 26% refresh rate for all the new properties that are coming into that particular market. This is also kind of an important variable because as it relates to volume, you not only want to make sure that you've got enough volume out there to start with, but that you're going to have good stuff also coming in. Right? There's always properties that are going to be going and coming. So typically you want to shoot for about a 25% refresh rate. You got 26%. So from that standpoint, that seems to be a nice healthy area. One of the most important figures on this page though is this next number, and this is this median sale to list ratio. So right now in this area, there's a 98% list to sale ratio. So that means I list a property for $100,000. I'm probably going to end up selling it for $98,000. This is a super important figure to think about as a real estate investor, right? Because this kind of indicates where the price elasticity is in any given market, right? So a market that has 100% list to sale price ratio means pretty much everybody lists a house, they're getting it for that. And that's also going to be the expectation of all of the agents that exist in that area. But the further we fall back on that, the more we get into a buyer's market territory. So 97%, actually typically anything under 98% is a buyer's market. So I would almost call this one a little bit more of a seller's market because we're up close to that 99%. But anything under the 98% really gets into the area where there's almost an acknowledgement that there's going to be a price discount before that property goes to sell. And I'll show you what this means. So if you look in here, you see the median list price is $423. And on average, for the months of February, they sold at $355. Now that doesn't totally line up, right, with that actual ratio, but that's a $70,000 swing from where that property gets listed versus where that property sells for. So that's kind of one interesting thing that sticks out in my mind, right? It's like, okay, what's the expectation in the market right now? Because as a listing agent, this is the very visible stuff that you're feeling and seeing on a day-to-day. You're going to send out an offer that might be at a pretty significant discount. Is it around this range? Is it close to that range? Is it going to be something that's not going to be totally insatiable? Because as we get into a more and more active market or a market that has a lot more buyer activity, that percentage comes up, and therefore you're going to get more listing agents and homeowners that are just willing to wait for the right deal to come along. Does all that make sense for everybody in the room? Bill, you can feel free to chime in too, brother. Do you want to add anything before I move on?
You're doing great, fellow data nerd. That's good stuff. Keep it up.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't too data driven here, but I promise you I'll provide you some actionable insights here in shortly. So the last thing I want to point out on this page is the median days to pending. This is probably one of our favorite data points to keep in mind because this, beyond everything else, shows how much buyer demand is in any given market. Here's the number. 54 days is the average right now in the US. So a market that has an average median days to pending less than 54 days is a faster, more buyer advantageous market. A market that has any days on market that's beyond that is a slower market, right? So there's just less buyer activity, there's less demand. I want to start by some of the strategies based upon this right here. Here's the dichotomy as it relates to investing on the MLS as it relates to days on market. If you're an investor, you're going to go into a market that has a 42, let's give a little more dramatic number here, but a 75 days on market number. That means properties, of course, are sitting much longer. There's probably going to be a lot more price discount that you can take away from that deal on average. But at the end of the day, after you get that deal under contract, it's going to be a little bit harder to move. There's less demand in the area. On the flip side of things, let's just say I pull up, and this is the town that I live in. Lucky me. Right now, there's a 5 median days to pending. It's 100% median list to sale ratio. So my opportunity to get that deal under contract is going to be significantly harder. But if I can, I'm going to be able to move that deal much, much, much faster. and probably for a greater spread. So there is no secret sauce of like, hey, what's the right place to land at? It's always a strategy that is based upon where you need to land, what you are trying to do. Like, what's your exit strategy? Are you looking to buy and hold? Are you looking to fix and flip? Are you looking to assign? All of these factors could come into play, but these numbers should give you a good indication as to what your expectation is like as you get into the market. So quick pause, see if there's any questions before I kind of move on.
For what it's worth to everyone, you know, the thresholds that I put in play when I'm looking at this, and I do most of the underwriting with my team. When we're talking about, you know, 30, 45, 60, 30 is definitely a very healthy number. 5 is ridiculous. Obviously, Jared's in a very competitive town. So it's going to be more difficult to get a deal too, because more sellers are just going to be aware of, you know, what the town is. But to his point, should be easier to move it to the buyer side. But little flags that I raise is after 45 days, and these are pretty arbitrary, right? But rules of thumb are nice. Over 45 days, I start to raise a yellow flag of like, okay, like, let me pay attention to this. Maybe, you know, have I been here before? Do I already have local buyers? Do I have to go like build a new buyers list? Over 60 days, I start to raise an orange flag and I say, okay, this is something that I need to make sure are my terms correct on my contract, right? So I can't just go into a 60-day plus market and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to close in 3 weeks or even 4 weeks, depending on, you know, how good of a price you feel like you're getting. But as I teach my sales guys, there's all these different like toggles, right? So every variable affects the other variable. So if you have a 60-day median market, you have to make sure that your contract is representative of that, unless asterisk, right? Your price is super strong and you got a crazy good reduction. But above 60, orange flag. And then once I get above 90 days, I'm really hitting like a no-fly zone. I would say even over 75 to 90, I'm very, very careful. And I'm making sure that maybe I get novation rights. For any of you that are not familiar with novation, it's essentially get it under contract, but also get rights to put it up on the MLS. You want to maximize your exposure when you're in those sort of situations. If we go back to, you know, me giving that funny story about how I got stuck doing cash conversion cycles. Cash conversion cycles get a lot tougher the higher you go up on the median DOM ladder, right? Ideally, a lot of us are, you know, wholesaling these properties and assigning. We're looking to churn and burn and have good sales velocity is another term that's used out there. And that becomes tougher to do in the 60-day plus markets. Not impossible. You just need to make sure you adjust your terms on your contract accordingly.
Right. That's a great segue. So this kind of leads to the next point, which is that price component, right? Now, part of this strategy is to create a good conversation. Like that's actually the main goal, right? Is to generate a good conversation. But the science and certainly the skill means landing at the right place where you can negotiate just enough to still get a successful deal in the road. So, i.e., I'm going to use Westchester here example because this would be a very challenging market to operate in as an investor, especially if I'm trying to get a deal under contract. But with a 5 median days depending and basically 100% list to sale ratio, if I come in at say 70% of whatever it's listed for, my opportunities of even starting a good conversation are going to be really, really hard. So you need to get the conversation started. You need to create the rapport in the beginning in order to ultimately close the deal at the end of the day. But you want to be critically careful of wherever you're going to submit that offer price. And a good way to think about this, let me go back to our example in Texas here, right? So we said the median sale price was $355, median list was $423. And again, you will keep in mind that these are a 30-day difference, and that's why it doesn't always line up with the median sale price. It's just the way the data comes in. But if I just do some quick math, that's a $68,000 spread from the median sale, or sorry, it's a $68,000 spread from the median list price. So if I take that number and I scroll up here to the top and I say, okay, what is 68,000 divided by 363? That's 18%. So, okay, holistically, I can think of an 18% discount of where I'd want to come in. So if I just take 100% as the list price, subtract 18%, well, that's going to get me 82%. Now, obviously, you don't want to start a conversation at 82% as investors. You want to maximize your spread as much as possible. But if you have that figure in the back of your head, you kind of know that that is probably the price buffer that an agent is going to be used to seeing or comfortable seeing, and ultimately what he is going to advocate to his seller. Because there's another part, right? If I'm an agent, I'm used to operating in, say, Waxahachie. I'm butchering the name. Sorry, Eli, but Waxahachie, Texas. Then I know maybe on average, I should probably see a $68,000 difference from whatever it gets listed for. Therefore, I'm going to tell my seller that, hey, don't worry, Mr. Seller. Yeah, I know they submitted an offer that's $100,000, but this is pretty normal for the market that we're playing in. Therefore, let's start an engaging conversation. So hopefully that kind of makes sense of how we're connecting some dots to what a listing agent is used to seeing, what they're feeling in their particular market, how this aligns with, say, the median days on market, how it aligns with the list to sale. Hopefully this gives you guys kind of a high level understanding of how we're thinking about some of these strategies. So I want to go into actually some of those unique strategies, but just quick pause to see if there are any other questions. All right. Fantastic. Oh, is this helpful? Maybe I could get a couple nods. All right, this is cool. Good. All right. I know sometimes when you start talking about numbers, people's like eyes glaze over. It's like the thing Clifford was saying around a spreadsheet. He's like, the last thing I want to look at is a spreadsheet full of numbers. But hopefully I try to make this as takeawayable as possible. Okay, let's talk about exit strategies. So as it relates, so Bill, he runs an operation that's got multiple exit strategies at his disposal. Not everybody does, and that's totally okay, right? A lot of folks have an assignment as kind of their one bread and butter thing. There's some folks that have, we'll just say, the buy and hold investment is the other. I'm going to break down kind of these two thought sequences into really just those two categories. And that's because at the end of the day, you can bucket novation and some of the other special stuff into the wholesale bucket anyway, whereas buy and hold is going to basically follow kind of a completely different set of principles. And if you give me just a minute here, I want to pull up some other screens. We're going to look at...
Redfin is another good source for this. Jerry had, just did the Zillow rundown, but Redfin's another good source. If you punch in the zip code and then you hit the sell drop down, there's a home values link out, and Redfin will give you median home value, median DOM. And then my favorite part about the Redfin experience is they give you a cute little thermometer, and it shows you how hot the area is on a 100 scale. So, if you're a visual person, that's part of my underwriting flow, but I always have Google Maps up, Zillow, and Redfin up, just to kind of cross compare some numbers. So you can use Redfin too if you're more, comfortable with Redfin.
Yeah, well said. All right, so this would be good, I think, for everybody to kind of also get in the head of their buyer, because look, getting a deal is great. Not being able to move a deal is not great, but being able to move a deal is fantastic. So you also need to position yourself as both the salesperson on the front end of the contract and then, of course, always on the back end of the contract as well. Part of that is also creating the space where you're going to tee this up for a good opportunity for an end buyer. Bill was kind of referring to this earlier, right? But you do have to go through an underwriting process as you're working to get the deal under contract, make sure it makes sense for a good price point. Well, something that, and you guys will all have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you may not always consider every sort of type of buyer that's out there, right? There's one thing of flipping your deal out to a flipper. There's another thing entirely of flipping it out to a buy and hold investor. And then, of course, there's land contracts and some of the more niche asset classes that are out there as well. But let's say you were looking at the existing. Now, let's look at a different one. Let's look at this one. And I got this one kind of fresh in my head because I was working with a customer of ours yesterday. But so this is Rome, Georgia. Here's kind of the rundown on the numbers in that market. We can see there's about a $50,000 difference in the list to sale, 97% list to sale ratio. So it's kind of a nice buyer's market to go get a deal under contract, and a 49 days to pending. So it's kind of a nice sweet spot in a lot of ways, right? For somebody to come in and maybe target some properties that are on the MLS. So this particular person, though, they were looking to acquire buy and hold investments, right? They want to go pick up a couple extra properties for themselves to look at. And there's a couple things you need to consider, right? And the first one, and I'm going to use some very high level things, or I'm going to use the 1% rule that maybe a lot of you are familiar with hearing. But what I want to understand is, if I'm going to use an on-market strategy to go target properties, can I still make that strategy work in a normal way for whatever strategy I'm trying to monetize at the end of the day? So i.e. a buy and hold investment. So a quick way to do this is, okay, I'm going to say, let's say it looks like I could probably have a nice price discount on wherever the conversation is going to start. This isn't, this is kind of middle of the road from a median days on market standpoint. So that means I should be able to generate a good frequency amount of conversations. And I can probably take about $50,000 from wherever it's listed from in order to acquire the property. I'm gonna scroll up here, just get a good baseline. So let's just call it 220 for easy math. That's where I need to be. I'm going to now go over to Zillow, and I can just type in Rome, Georgia. I did that here. Select for rent. And I want to do just a quick scan, and I want to try and match, maybe the type of asset class that I'm after, right? So I could just come here to home type, and if I'm only looking for apartments, condos, I could start there. If I'm only looking for townhomes, etc. But I'm just going to uncheck everything else, and I'm going to select houses. And then just doing a quick scan, I want to come over here and see what is mostly on the market. So it looks like we got 2 bed, 1 bath, 3 bed, 1.5 bath, 2 bed, 2 bath, 3 bed, 2 bath. Okay, so it's kind of middle of the road. And I'm seeing a lot of $1,500 to $1,300. I'm not seeing an incredible amount of $2,000. Not to say that I couldn't find a property like this where it is $2,000. Looks like maybe it's a little bit bigger. Looks like it's maybe in a little bit better shape. But I'm doing a quick scan here to make sure I understand, like, what else is out there. If I am going to go list my property, is it going to be in line with what people are used to seeing there? Or do I run the risk of getting a 3,000 square foot property under contract that I would have to rent out for, $3,500, and it's going to be significantly overpriced for the area because there's nothing else out there that meets that model? Really, what you're trying to do is you are trying to find whatever the average is for that particular area. So let's just say it's $1,500. We'll call it $1,800 because it looks like there's a couple higher line things that are in here. As it relates to the 225, I just do some quick math. That is 0.8%. So reasonably close, right? Depending on what price you might be able to get a property at, you may want to consider that. So one of the things I'm going to think about as it relates to now going to get the properties under contract, I now know what my rental comps are in a particular area. What I'd like to do is now get a deal under contract that's right around the 1% rule. So we know you've got about 0.2 of a percentage point that I need to get in there. So I'm just going to pull this number out, but I would ideally like to get a home under contract around a 190. So when I'm thinking about targeting, I'm going to select everything that's between, say, $100,000 and $250,000 is where I maybe start my filtering process. And then from there, of course, you can back into that with whatever percentage you need to actually start the conversation. But what that's going to give me the ability to do is I know that the type of property that I'm after, and hopefully where I land on the ultimate price, is going to land me basically smack dab in that sweet spot of where all of the other rental comps come into play. You've got the most amount of buyers that are within that window, so you're not trying to struggle to get that property filled. Another quick pause. Any questions? I also realize we are butting up on time here. Anything anybody wants to add?
I'll give you guys the napkin math version of that, or for those of us who don't want to do all the percentages. I say this to my guys all the time. For every $100,000 that you are looking to spend, that means the property needs to be making $1,000, right? That is just the 1% rule. But sometimes when you say it like that out loud and you're looking at things, it's a little bit easier than trying to actually do the math. So every $100,000 you're looking to spend on a property, is it producing $1,000 in rental revenue in return? Gets you to a very rough baseline, right? I would encourage everyone to have some form of calculator, pro forma, model, whatever that goes further than that. Because every investor that you're going to be selling it to likely does. So you should know your numbers too. But it's at least a good, high level benchmark for you.
Yep. Did we get a question? Oh, just somebody dropping there. All right. So we actually have 7 minutes left. I don't want to run out of time on anything that anybody else has questions on. So let me just pause real quick. Does anybody have any final questions, any thoughts? I do have some questions, I think kind of some pre-questions I want to roll through and answer real quick, but I want to make sure that we get to anybody that's live here first. Okay, cool. So here's a couple questions from the audience. We talked about that. Here's a question, a couple, and this is relating to the Rafi platform. A lot of investors like to share subscriptions for a platform. Is Rafi one of those things? Yes, to a degree. You can totally allow access to other folks that are you may want to like JV with into your platform itself. Just keep in mind, if you do kind of share an account, there's only going to be one person or kind of center point of contact where all of the offers and all the communications are coming from. But as it relates to, hey, I want somebody else to come into this thing and play around with me, you can absolutely share responsibility. Follow-ups.
Hey,
Okay,
brother,
last one. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have a kind of piggyback question off that. So I mentioned earlier, we're going to be hiring and bringing on a guy. He actually starts next Wednesday. I hadn't even spoke with you about it. What would it look like? Like, I don't want to give him quote unquote my login. Is there like a team member login? I guess I never asked. I've never inquired about it.
Yep, there is, and it's super simple. So you would come to your account, you go to your settings tab, find team members, come in here, throw that person's email address in, hit that little mail button. It'll send them the invite, and then they will have the ability to come in here and log in. It's pretty simple. Perfect.
And do you think that will all of the email responses that get in my personal email that's becoming overwhelmed?
Say that again. Sorry, you cut out.
You know how it responds to my personal inbox as well?
Mm-hmm.
Can we switch those over to him so my email can quit being overran?
Yes, we can do that. Absolutely. That is just if you don't mind me, shoot me an email post call here. The switch over to a new name is just, it's not something I would have you do yourself. I'll do that for you, but it's a very simple process and we can convert that over whenever.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Awesome.
Lori, looks like you asked me a question. As a Rafi user client, does that offer strategy session to the user such as you just described with the Roam client example? Are you just, I just want to make sure I understand. Are you just saying, do we do that process with kind of like the new folks that we bring into our platform? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you nailed it. So the onboarding experience for somebody new that's coming onto the platform is, we'll ask you to gather a bunch of stuff for us so we can set up your account. We'll have an initial kind of like an account creation call. Once we have all of like the harder components in place, then typically it's like you and me, we jump on a call and we literally roll through what I just did. But we will typically use whatever you're trying to accomplish as like the focus point. Hey, Jared, I want to just wholesale. I just want to look for blah, blah, blah. I'm looking to get this many deals. And we will literally take your market and we'll piece together a strategy that we would use when we go into a particular area to start as, good counsel. I'm like, hey, this is what we're thinking about. This is what we're doing. You can, of course, dictate wherever you'd like to ultimately go. You can do whatever you want at the end of the day, but we'll go through the same motions with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And at the end of the call, will you be just re-highlighting just price points with Rafi?
Yeah, sure. I can hit that real quick. We only have 3 minutes left. So if for anybody that's, not a current, member of our platform or maybe is interesting, let me just kind of show you real quick how we operate. Here's an example. So this is Texas. As you can see, we take a state, we subdivide it into markets. So each one of these colors represents its own unique market. We sublicense the exclusive rights to each one of these markets just to one person. I mean, exclusive meaning we only allow one person or one team into that particular area. We've done this quite intentionally by design for 2 reasons. As investors, we've been a part of lead providers in the past where you might be the 3rd or 5th person to call that lead. It just kills your effectiveness on the deal. We hate that. And the second thing is that because this is on market opportunities, there's just a limited number of swings at the bat. So we don't want to allow 15 other people access to the same area, potentially targeting the same thing. So we have an exclusivity agreement. Each one of these markets is independently priced. That price really is just predicated on how much population or opportunity is in a given area. And it's just a month-to-month subscription model, if you will, and there's no commitments on it. So the range on the pricing can be anywhere from like a couple $100 a month all the way up to a couple $1,000s a month for like an LA county, something like that. But if you have any more like specific questions on pricing, I'll drop my email here at the chat here in a second. You guys can send me whatever you need. I'm happy to send that to you.
It's probably also worth mentioning that we've been putting a lot of good work into our Rafi communal folder. And that is just a lot of sales process content, some things that I've spent, tens of thousands of dollars on over the years, and some things that have just been produced organically through my experience of just how to manage a team, like what numbers to look at from the acquisitions department, from the dispo department. We're working on some TC content to carry over to the Rafi communal folder, but that package in itself is, has some sort of dollar figure associated with it of, I don't know how to, really quantify that value, but that is part of what the Rafi community offering is. Side note, Clifford, you should be getting your little specific dispo package soon. I don't know if Dorian got it to you already, but coming soon, brother. I didn't forget about it.
Thank you, bud. I appreciate it.
Lori, did you have any other questions there? I want to make sure I answered anything you might have.
No, that was great. Thank you very much. This has been very effective today.
Good. Tom, Susan, good to see you too.
Hey,
What do you got for me?
we were just curious as to what areas are still available in the state of Texas.
Does Clifford have all of them?
I tried to. I'll say this, and I'm sorry, I know you weren't asking me this question, but I'll throw this disclaimer out there. I do have quite a bit of Texas taken up, and Jared and Bill, I am 100% open and okay with releasing a market that, especially if one of the Corral community members want it, I'm definitely open to giving that up, because too, I'm also jumping into Columbus now. We talked about Charlotte now. I think those are actually active now. So I'm not scared to jump into another state. So if a community member wants Texas, I'll let it go.
To answer your question, Tom and Susan, there's only 3 locations left, and they are the green one, this gray one, and this yellow one. Orange, not yellow. Sorry.
Okay.
That's all that's left in Texas right now, unless Clifford decides that he wants to
give
somebody else a shot.
Green is Amarillo. Like we didn't even discuss Amarillo.
This is basically the way our conversation started. Well, yeah, like, what do you want to do? Like, where else can we go?
Yeah. Well, we had talked about, because we have the Waco area currently, and we had talked about possibly an area in Florida that we might look at. But
we do have some Florida open. I guess I can share that. Hang tight. Florida. Let's see what's left. Daytona, Everglades, Florida, Miami, Panhandle. Okay. Here is Florida. So I can zoom out just a smidge. The whole Panhandle from Gainesville up to the Mobile, that's open. Miami's open, and this area right here is also open. Pretty much everything else is taken in Florida.
okay.
So
All right, we'll think about that one then.
yeah, no sweat. I dropped my email in the chat too for anybody that's kind of not familiar with who I am or what we're doing. Happy to also link up if you want a formal demo run through of everything. So let's be conscious of everybody's time. It's kind of top of our time here, our 90 minutes. Just quick thanks to Clifford. Really very grateful for your time, sir. It's always awesome having you kind of in our sphere of influence, man. So appreciate you. For everybody else on the call, thanks for joining. It was, hopefully this was valuable for everybody. Hopefully you got a couple nuggets. if you got a couple more nuggets, hopefully this gives you some strategy you can go for. You guys are so welcome. Any questions, shoot me an email. I'm very available, phone call, email, text. I'll also give you my booking link if you ever want to book some time just to kind of chat. Happy to do so. So happy Thursday, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
See you guys.
Bye.